Hello, everyone. This is day 2 of our retreat. Yesterday was very informative. We learned a lot of things, and today we'll be learning even more. And we'll be learning from my colleague Harrison, and he's an environmental. What was it called? He's an environmental engineer by profession. All right. And he's also a climate action leader and consultant. He is also the executive director of the International Students Environmental Coalition. So you can see that his entire life is all about the environment, and he's very passionate about the environment. Currently, he's working on a project, the Clean Air Initiative. And let me not go into that so that I will not take off his time, because he's a German. He just loves the German time. And I know he already has his time planned out. Yeah. So what I mean with everything I've been saying is that he's very grounded in the topic, the environment. Apart from being grounded and being passionate about it, he's someone that has also explored a lot of opportunities in the sector. So I don't think there's any other person who would be best to handle this topic more than he would. So please, let's all pay attention. Like I already mentioned yesterday, hope you're here with your writing materials. Don't just come and listen because you should be here, but take full advantage. Ask him all the questions you have and learn everything he knows about this. And let us also, most importantly, plan to implement everything that we've learned. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that was a kind of a very nice introduction. Thank you so much, Abere. And so just go ahead and share my screen and we get to it. Okay, is my screen visible? Let me go to presentation mode. Okay. Is it visible now?
Yes, we can see your screen.
All right. Okay, so hello, everyone. Like Ebere said, my name is Harrison Ashangwa. I'm from Cameroon, and I'm here in Germany with Ebere. When she told me about that the organization is having a retreat, I was like, of course, I know what SAF is working on, girls adoption project. I've been hearing girls adoption project for like every day now for the past 5 months. So when she said she wanted me to do a presentation on climate change, actually climate change is so broad, and I was thinking that I was thinking what I could really talk about, because of course I could talk a whole lot of things about climate change, but I wanted it to be relevant to the work you guys do, so that if we share some thoughts, it can be interesting for your work with girls and women's empowerment. And there's a whole lot of information about climate change. And I don't want, the disclaimer is that this presentation, I tried to make it less scientific as possible, so that I didn't know how the team is like. So that we can really get like some realities of what climate change is all about. And I hope that at the end we can have some discussions, hear what the thoughts that the team have in terms of maybe putting climate action, considering climate action in the work that you do. It will be quite interesting. So I titled this topic, exploring the intersection of climate change and women's empowerment in Africa. It will be more of a discussion, and I hope that we can really grab one or two things and more of sharing what SAF is planning. What do you think you can do in terms of climate action in Nigeria? And lucky enough, I know a lot about Nigeria. I've been there a couple of times, and so, yeah. And so this is how I will structure this presentation. I will start by saying a few things about myself so that we can get like a fair idea of who I am. And because I didn't actually, like again, I said I didn't know what the team is like, I also wanted us to maybe look at what climate change is all about, just some basic background. I will not present any scientific information or just give like some basic ideas about climate change and maybe some impacts. And I also wanted us to look at climate change and impacts on women, because women, children, and girls, they are disproportionately affected by climate change. And studies, statistics, science has proven that. And maybe we'll try to look at how that streamlines to Africa and maybe West Africa. And we can look at maybe the situation in Ebonyi State or Nigeria in general and see what we can talk about. And then I also wanted us to look at what are the challenges faced by women in adapting to climate change. Because when it comes to climate change, the two things that people need to know about is mitigation and adaptation. Of course, some people talk about resilience. Resilience is still part of adaptation. So I hope we can also look at that. And then one important thing I also wanted us to talk about is women as agents of change for climate action in Africa, maybe even girls as agents of change. I have a lot of amazing people in Nigeria, and you guys all know of them, that they do a lot of work in terms of climate action. And the last thing I also wanted, the last but one thing, I hope we can look at, how do we amplify the voices of women on climate change issues? How do we amplify the voices of girls on climate change issues? The local girl in Abalaki, in, how do you call? So the girl there, or maybe the woman there that is doing climate action without necessarily understanding that it's climate action. How do you amplify their voices as an organization, as an individual? And finally, one thing that I wanted to see is a discussion that I hope we can get is, how do you, OSAF, Sisters Allies Foundation, how do you guys promote climate action in your work? It could be some reflection, we can think about it, and the skills training, how does climate change play into it, and all those things. So I hope it can be interesting for us. So yeah. And I'm not sure why. All right, a little about myself is like Ebere said, I'm an environmental engineer by training, environmental and civil engineer. I have a master's degree in environmental engineering, a master's degree in environmental sciences. So I'm kind of in a lot of, I saw that when I did engineering, I wanted to get some grounding in climate science. So I did a master's in environmental sciences. And in that master's, I focus on air quality. So I'm also a climate action specialist. So I work on a couple of things, maybe in a couple of African countries and also around. Mostly, I'm also a consultant. I work with a couple of organizations like Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. I work with them on some transport projects in Cameroon and air quality projects in Cameroon. I'm also an environmental educator. And since I met Ebere here, I'm also a research fellow at ISA here in Germany. So I'm with ISA here. We've been here since March, and we hope to be here to November. And I'm also the executive director of the International Student Environmental Coalition. And the International Student Environmental Coalition is kind of like a network of young people. Like, we are in 32 countries. What we do basically is we give young people in these countries like the organizational support they need, the resources, the capacity to be able to address environmental challenges in their communities, the way they see those challenges. So we've been operating since 2016, and so we're happy about the work we do. And sometimes I'm really proud of the work we do, because young people are the future of everything when it comes to climate action, climate change. The impacts will be felt by these people. So I'm seeing another person wants to join. Let me just add. And I'm also a CEE Change Fellow, a 2023-2024 Civic and Environmental Engagement Change Fellow. It's a project. It's actually a program. It's an 18-month fellowship by the North American Association for Environmental Education, and it's sponsored by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the Cedar Tree Foundation. So I do a lot of environmental education work, civic engagement back home in Cameroon, and also in these African countries where we work. So I'm really passionate about youth empowerment and community development. It's something that gives me a lot of hope for the future. And I always say I'm committed to sustainable and equitable future for our planet, both locally, globally, and internationally. So this is a little about me. I don't want to say much about the other projects I've been working on, but I'm really grounded about some of the climate change issues in Cameroon, maybe in Africa as well. I worked on a project in Anambra State. It was on biomethanization. So I have a fair idea about the climate space in Nigeria because I also do a lot of research. I have a fair idea about the scenario, the situation of climate change in Nigeria. I even work on a project in Abuja. So I was looking at almost all the, I think I can remember almost all the states of Nigeria. And so it's just like maybe someone said I'm in Nigeria, I'm more of a Nigerian than a Cameroonian. But okay, so that's a little about myself. Before we start, I wanted to share a poll just to get a fair understanding about what we are. So I will share this poll and it's a Slido poll so that let's see how we get to it. Okay. So please, can you just, I think you can all see the screen, right? Hello?
Yes.
Is my
Yes.
screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe you can just scan the code or you type slido.com on your browser and you enter this code, and then we can start the first question for the pool so that we get a fair understanding of what. So we'll have the first question, and this is the first question. So what comes to mind when you hear climate change? Of course, just generic. I really wanted to see how the kind of ideas that the kind of thoughts we come about. Okay, flooding. Interesting. Yeah. Disaster as well. Okay.
Everybody is supposed to scan this code. Please, let's scan this code. Once you scan the code, you'll be able to answer the question.
Or you can just actually type slido.com on your browser, on your phone, and then enter this code. You'll be able to answer the question. On the screen, you just see enter code. So you enter this code 2686. There are like a few questions. I just think just 3 questions for us to look at. Okay, drought, disaster, flooding. Is it working for everyone? Is
If
everyone able to?
if you're having any challenges scanning it, please let us know.
Or better, instead of scanning, they could just type slido.com on this thing and then enter the code. You'll be able to answer the question. And then you type and you see how it. Oh, drought, disaster, weather, desertification, environment, flooding. Interesting. Okay. Change of the atmosphere. Hot sun. Urgency. Okay, we go again for 1 minute. Toxic environment. Okay. 2 minutes, and we go to the next question. This is interesting. Extreme weather conditions. Wow, too much rainfall or heat. Change of weather. Right, this are quite interesting. So let's go. All right, maybe the last one. Crisis. Crisis. I love this. Climate change is actually a crisis, a serious crisis. So go to the next question. All right, you see, these are interesting, these topics you have. The next question is, how familiar are you with the impacts of climate change in Nigeria? Maybe let's see the results coming. Somewhat familiar. Yeah, we are 8 of us. Let's see what comes.
Yeah, so just you don't have to scan again if you've scanned before.
Yeah, you don't have to scan again. The question will just change. You just need to answer.
Question will just change, you just answer.
40%. Wow, not familiar at all. Okay. All right. Has everyone answered? So somewhat familiar is like we're all, majority of us are somehow familiar about the impacts of climate change in Nigeria. And I think we are all familiar. It's just that we don't know that it's climate change. So let's go to the last whole question. Now, this one you type, in what ways have you seen climate change affect the women in your community? Maybe it's Abalaki. Abera, how do you pronounce it again? Abalaki.
Is Abakaliki.
Abakaliki, okay, maybe it's Ebonyi State or Anambra State. In what ways have you seen climate change affect the women in your community? Maybe just type, have you seen it? Or maybe if you're a woman, how do you think climate change is affecting you? This will be interesting as we discuss through, as we go through this discussion. Quite interesting to see these ideas. All right, please endeavor to type at least. Yeah, try to just think about it. In what ways have you seen climate change affect the women in your community? I think I also have to type. Unreliable weather conditions affecting farming. Beautiful. Agricultural challenges. Women who are often heavily involved in farming face reduced crop yields and soil fertility due to erratic rainfall and extreme weather, impacting their livelihoods and food security. Absolutely. Absolutely. Unreliable weather conditions affecting farming. Things are so unpredictable nowadays. Okay, let's keep them coming. Let's keep them coming. I think when we get like 7, we can get into the presentation now. Like when we get 6, at least 6 contribution. Amazing. I've seen women losing their farm yields because of heavy rains and then bad weather. That does not help plants grow effectively. It affects the planting season, thereby making food scarce. Most women in our community are farmers who sell farm produce, so it affects their income and feeding. Wow. See that climate change is definitely around us. Most farming and then women, you see that what is really constant is women and farming. This is quite interesting. These are the real impacts of climate change that women face. For the women who farm, it affects their farming activities and it can destroy their crops or add to head count. It definitely destroys their crops. There are some statistics that are so startling that about the impacts of climate change on agricultural activities in West Africa, East Africa, in fact, the whole of Africa, especially because the majority of the population are depending on smallholder farmers. So these are real issues. Wow, I love this. It prevents girls from going to school during heavy rainfalls. You can imagine. You can imagine this. This is something that, and climate change affects almost every sector. It affects education, it affects health, it affects finances, it affects communities, it affects even, imagine people not able to go to school because floods, schools have been destroyed. So climate change is so intersecting, and we'll see this in a couple of slides. But I really love these responses. And I think we one more to go on. Perfect. It affects women financially as climate change affects their livestock, poultry, crops. Also, climate change has caused scarcity of resources. Most people in my community are farmers, and when the source of income is affected, girls are mostly like to stop schooling, and boys' education are prioritized over theirs. You can imagine, and you see this first point, it just summarizes what SAF is doing. When the impacts of climate change can cause families, can affect the income of families. And when it affects the income of families, they cannot send all their children to school. When they cannot send all their children to school, they'll prioritize boys and the girls stay out of school. And this is what, so you can see that SAF cannot keep out climate change from the work they do. Because climate change is definitely, I love this response actually. It summarizes all the work you're doing. So these are interesting discussions, and it's really exciting to see this. Women, farm, and crop. So I think I can stop sharing this. These were the three questions I had so that we could get a grounding of how things are in the community. And just as I thought, just as the research shows, these are the realities of climate change around us. And so I'll stop sharing and go back to my slide, and then we can start from there. Okay, perfect. All right. as you have seen in the poll, as we've all seen in the poll, these are the realities of climate change that we face. Girls empowerment, you cannot separate girls empowerment from climate change. We cannot separate women's empowerment from climate change. Any organization now that's working on any issue, they need to take climate change into consideration. As you have all identified from this short poll, it is quite interesting. It's quite interesting. I like the point that said that because majority of people in our communities are farmers, climate change is affecting crop yields. And when it affects crop yields, it affects their finances. When they are not able to send all their children to school, what happens? They prioritize boys over girls. So boys go to school while girls stay at home. So climate change indirectly is affecting girls' education. So we can see that we cannot separate, you cannot work. Nowadays, we can't work in silos. Everything is intersecting. And climate change, as a matter of fact, is intersecting with every other issue that happens that we are in our communities. For example, if you look at these pictures, this is definitely climate change. The first picture is Lagos. These are floods in Lagos. And I cannot emphasize again enough about the statistics, what is happening in Lagos, in Nigeria, because the realities are there. This is East Africa. This picture, the second picture is Kenya. Kenya, since 2023, Kenya is suffering, the whole of East Africa, particularly Kenya, is suffering from the worst drought in 50 years. And I saw a study, an estimate that said that by the end of 2024, more than 10 million people will need food assistance, urgent food assistance in Kenya. These are the realities of climate. Climate change is not a far-fetched thing. It is affecting us. This one is in South Africa. This is bushfire. This is wildfire. Sometimes when we see wildfire, maybe in Canada, in North America, and Europe, we think wildfire actually happens in Africa. It affects us. And this is Cyclone Freddy in Malawi. This Cyclone Freddy in Malawi, it caused the damages that this cyclone caused. It was estimated to be over 18 billion US dollars. You can imagine what is happening. If people are still suffering and climate change is compounding what? The already existing issues that we are facing. So we cannot choose development and maybe forget climate change. No, we cannot choose development over climate change. So the two things are intersecting. You cannot choose girls' empowerment or women's empowerment and leave climate change. Because we need to work, so these things need to work together. This is climate change. These are the realities that you see. And I like this. This is Pope Francis said earlier this year that climate change at this moment is a road to death. It's a road to death. It's not only in Europe. It's not only in the West. It's not in North America. It's not only in North America. It's everywhere. And I don't know if it is unfortunate or is a fortunate thing. The unfortunate thing is that climate change affects everyone, whether you are rich or poor. Now, the sad reality of it is that the rich countries are able to adapt to the negative impacts of climate change, while poor countries cannot. For example, if floods are happening, imagine the destruction of floods. Poor people always stay in areas that are prone to floods, where land management is not prioritized. Flooding, they are very prone to flood. So when floods happen, it first destroys their properties. The rich people stay in areas where there's good land management, there's good drainage system, so you hardly find floods in those areas. So it affects the poor. And women are also so vulnerable. There are studies by the UN that says that women, girls, children are the most vulnerable group to the impacts of climate change. So, Saf, I hope that with some of these conversations that we're having and more projects that you do, you can look at the work you do. You don't separate. It's like you can look at climate action in the work that you do. This is quite interesting. And if you look at, I wanted to look at a little bit of background about, like I said, I don't want to make this presentation scientific. I didn't want to bring any scientific definition of climate change here, but I wanted us to look at, if we go back to Earth, this is our planet. Earth is the only planet that supports life. And all of us know the difference between weather and climate. And the sun is the reason why we have life on Earth. But there's this thing, when you talk about climate change, there's something that we in most conversation around climate change, you hear people talking about greenhouse gases, greenhouse gases, greenhouse gases, greenhouse gases, greenhouse gases. But there's actually something they call the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is the reason why we have life on Earth. Without the greenhouse effect, life would not be possible on Earth. That's just it. Now, the enhanced greenhouse effect is what is causing climate change. Enhanced greenhouse effect. There's a difference between greenhouse effect and enhanced greenhouse effect. If there's no greenhouse effect, no life on Earth. So if you look at weather and climate, it is regulated by the sun. Our atmosphere is regulated by the sun. So let's try to look at what greenhouse effect is. Greenhouse effect is actually a natural process that keeps the Earth warm. We know that our Earth, the Earth's surface has a layer of gases that we call the atmosphere. And if you look at, this is our atmosphere, and the direct sun rays, this is the heat from the sun. The heat from the sun is what is responsible for life on Earth. Now, solar radiation travels from the sun to the Earth. But when sun is coming, it passes through the atmosphere. The atmosphere is made up of a layer of gases. And those gases, we call them greenhouse gases. Those greenhouse gases are, you have water vapor. The three major greenhouse, you have water vapor, you have carbon dioxide, you have methane, you have nitrous oxide. Those are some of the greenhouse gases that make up the atmosphere. That, for example, let me just say this. For example, this is the simple example of greenhouse effect. I don't know if most of you drive cars, but under a sunny weather, when you sit in your car, or when you are not in your car, when the sun rays hit the screen of the glasses of your car, sun get into it. And that's why when you enter your car, what happens? The car is warm. That's actually what is that's basically the greenhouse effect. So sun rays, solar radiation from the sun, it actually passes through the atmosphere. When it reaches the atmosphere, some of those greenhouse gases, the atmosphere reflect some of the heat back into the atmosphere, back into space. While most of the solar radiation passes through the atmosphere and gets into the Earth's surface. When it gets into the Earth's surface, what happens is that the Earth absorbs some of the radiation and re-radiate it as infrared radiation. And infrared is like a short wavelength. This one that is entering the Earth's surface, it can pass through the Earth's surface because it is long wave. Now, when it is going out, it's going out in short wavelength. I don't know, let me just go into physics. It's going out as short infrared radiation. Now, when it gets back to the atmosphere, because these greenhouse gases that we've mentioned, methane, carbon dioxide, water vapor, it's very important. Some people don't know that water vapor is a greenhouse gas. Water vapor, carbon dioxide, it is that heat is that those gases in the atmosphere, they trap the heat. They trap that infrared radiation because it's short wavelength. And it is that heat that is re-radiated within the Earth's surface that keeps the Earth warm. Without this greenhouse effect, there will be no life on Earth. Temperatures on Earth will be minus degrees. I think minus 15, if I'm not sure, but it will be below 0 degrees Celsius. So it's not possible for life to be possible on Earth without the greenhouse effect. Now, the problem we have is that human activities have increased the concentration of these greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So through human activities, we've increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We've increased methane in the atmosphere. We've increased nitrous oxide in the atmosphere. This is what happens. Now, when more heat is trapped, the earth gets warmer. It's so warm. So if you guys, I don't know if a couple of you have been studied maybe the evolution of climate change. Climate change actually started as global warming. It was a concept of global warming that was so common. But it's not only warming. There are places that are getting colder while other places are getting warmer. It's still the same phenomenon of climate change. It's still the same phenomena of the increase of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So what are we supposed to do? Greenhouse effect is a natural process that keeps the earth warm. Our problem is that we've increased the concentration of those greenhouse gases in the atmosphere through our human activities, burning of fossil fuels, agricultural activities, deforestation, the use of fertilizers, transportation, construction activity has increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, methane, nitrous oxide, other chlorofluorocarbons that are in the atmosphere. That is what now is the enhanced greenhouse effect. But the process still remains is natural. Normally, climate change is natural, but it's a natural process. But human being, what we are facing in recent years is caused by human activities. The climate has been changing since the formation of the earth. The climate has been changing. It's not only now that the climate has started changing. Climate change has been there since, and it's a natural process because volcanic activities, they also release these greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. But what we are facing now is climate change that is caused by human activities from the Industrial Revolution and from the burning of fossil fuels. That is basically what it is. So if you don't take anything today, one thing that you should take is that greenhouse effect. Life exists on Earth because of the greenhouse effect. Without greenhouse effect, life will not be possible. Secondly, what is happening is because we are having the enhanced greenhouse effect, which is causing climate change. Basically, what happens? Human beings are increasing the concentration of greenhouse gases. And in those greenhouse gases, the major ones that you should remember is you have carbon dioxide, you have methane, you have water vapor, you have nitrous oxide, you have chlorofluorocarbons. You can remember those. So what do we need to do? We need to reduce those emissions. We need to reduce emissions into the atmosphere. That is it. That is simply it. That's what we are talking about. So it's basically what is happening with climate change. So I hope that maybe this gives a little clarification. But of course, you can still check again about what this greenhouse effect is all about. And this is what I wanted to say concerning this greenhouse effect. So without greenhouse effect, life will not exist on Earth. Sometimes when people, because I've seen a lot of people, they're attributing, like, they think that greenhouse effect is bad. Greenhouse effect is not bad. Without it, we will not live on this Earth. And that is the reality. But what is causing climate change, again, is enhanced greenhouse effect, increase of the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which absorbs more of the infrared radiation that is re-radiated back into the Earth's surface. That is what happens. Now, human activities, these are startling statistics, startling data. I just want to bring a lot of this data because sometimes it's really overwhelming and people sometimes cannot fathom what this data is all about. There are studies that show that we are spewing 162 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into the thin share of our atmosphere every 24 hours, as if it were an open sewer. This is what's happening. Emissions are, I'll show a graph how our greenhouse gas emission has been increasing since the Industrial Revolution. We have not gone down. It keeps increasing. And one thing that people fail to understand is that the emission that we cause today, we will feel it in the next 60 years. Those still cause us climate change. Because, for example, the greenhouse gases, they stay a long time in the atmosphere. I think methane stays 10 to 15 years in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide stays longer. Water vapor stays the shortest time. So what we are facing nowadays, the climate change we are facing nowadays is from historic emission, from the Industrial Revolution. All those emissions is what we are seeing the effects today. So the impact, the emission that we are causing today, even in the next 10, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, we'll still have climate change. So today, for example, if we stop emission, so if we get to net zero, you hear in a lot of conversations, they'll say net zero, we need to get to net zero by 2050. Net zero simply means that the emissions that we produce is the same emission that we, like the emission that we remove from the atmosphere produce is the same emission that we absorb from the atmosphere. They are net zero. So we don't have any net emission of gases into the atmosphere. Even if we get to net zero today, so zero emission into, and we still have climate change, we still have these impacts that we are facing. The worst case scenario is that if we continue emitting gases into the atmosphere, the impacts in the future will be devastating. We've not seen anything yet. Those floods that you're seeing in Africa, we've not seen. And so these are some of the issues. I hope that I'm not getting too technical about this. And globally speaking, I don't want to focus on Africa, but globally speaking, these are the biggest sources of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. First, industrial processes. Industrial processes, they produce a lot of greenhouse gases. Industrial processes involve the burning of fossil fuels. You know this in Nigeria. Fossil fuels are what? Gas, oil, coal, and all these things. When we burn them, it produces carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. Like we've said in the greenhouse effect, the more gases we have in the atmosphere, the more the climate will change. Coal mining, towing permafrost. Air transport also is, when I see transport, something that I'm working on. So transport is, it also contributes a lot. Oil production, you know, Nigeria is an oil state in Africa. It's one of the major producers of oil in Africa, if not the major, even in the world. So crop burning, agriculture is also a sector that produces a lot of emission. For example, in Cameroon, I don't know about Nigeria, the major sector that produces emission in Cameroon, one of them is agriculture, the agricultural sector. Some people are saying that they think that because we are just doing agriculture, we produce emission. I'm not sure about Nigeria. I'm sure it's fossil fuels as well, because Nigeria produces a lot of fossil fuel, a lot of gas, oil, and that. We also see landfills as well. These are some of the things that increase emission. Let's take it very simple. In your community, maybe in Abalak, in Ebonyi State, what do you see that, for example, the easiest thing that you see is waste management, poor waste, poor disposal of waste. For example, let me give you an example of waste management. Waste, this is landfill here. Basically, this landfill, when we carry all our waste and we go and dump in this landfill, what happens is that organic waste decomposes and produces methane. Methane goes back into the atmosphere. And methane is, within a period of 20 years or 100 years, methane is 25 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So within a period of 100 years, methane is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And for example, in your community, there's poor management of waste. People just dispose of the organic waste anyhow. And what happens? When we dispose that waste anyhow, it decomposes and produces methane. Methane goes back into the atmosphere. It's a greenhouse gas. So you're contributing to climate change in our homes. When we do open burning is Nigeria is one of the countries with open burning. That's very high. I was reading a study by United Nations Environment Program. Open burning in Nigeria is very high. Open burning and open defecation as well. Those are some high challenges in Nigeria. So these are some of the things that increase the emission of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. Now, like I said before, the burning of fossil fuels is our major source of emission. I wanted to show this graph because I think it's important. I didn't want to bring a lot of statistics, but let's see this graph. this is the Industrial Revolution. Since the Industrial Revolution, we have never reduced emission. Emission has been increasing yearly from the burning of fossil fuels. If you look at, there's a sharp decrease here. This sharp decrease here was in 2008. This sharp decrease around here, that emissions were dropping. But the general trend is that it's like a linear, it's increasing. There's a sharp, we had a sharp decrease here because of the Great Depression in 2008. Now, this is 2019. There's a sharp decrease here from, you see that we peaked in 2019, at the beginning of 2019, and we started decreasing. This was COVID-19. So because of COVID-19, industrial activity, human activities, emission were reduced. But after COVID-19, we went back to the default mode. Default mode, emissions will continue to increase. This is where we are. So this is what is happening. Burning of fossil fuels is increasing emission. This is a little background I wanted to give about this climate change. And another thing is, for example, if we start looking at the statistics, sometimes it's too much to phantom, but when we compare, you can really understand what is happening. They say the energy that is trapped by man-made global warming pollution, so the pollution caused by one man-made, is equivalent to exploding 750,000 first-generation atomic bombs per day, 365 days per year. You can imagine those atomic bombs that were thrown in Hiroshima and Nagasaki that led to the end of the Second World War. This is what, when you look at the statistics, sometimes it's hard to compare, but when you look at the magnitude, annually, human beings emit 54 billion tons of carbon dioxide. 54 billion tons of carbon dioxide. This might not be able, sometimes you are not able to phantom this, but if you see that the emission that we cause daily from our activities, it's equivalent to exploding 750,000 atomic bombs per day, every day for 365 days per year. It's crazy. So this is where we are. Climate is changing, and what is happening? Human beings are causing climate change from human activities, industrial activities, burning of fossil fuels, agricultural activities, the transportation sector. And the honest truth is that climate change is impacting poor people more than the rich. The most vulnerable people to the impact of climate change are the very poor people. In 2023, there was flooding here in Germany. There was serious flooding in Germany. But do you know why the impacts? Go to that city where that flooding was. It's like they have recovered from the devastating impact. Because of what? Because they have the money. There's insurance that covers some of this negative impact. But go to Malawi. In the next 20 years, the destruction, 18 billion, where 18 billion US dollar come from? To take care of those damages. So we need to do what we can to reduce emission. We need to adapt to climate change. We need to be resilient of the most vulnerable people. That's what we are supposed to do. That's what we are supposed to do. And I hope in the next couple of slides, we can see some ways that what we are doing makes sense. Nowadays, climate change is so common. But 25 years ago, people could be excused for not knowing much or doing much about climate change. Today, there's no excuse. There's no excuse. Your organization, you as a person, there's no excuse about not knowing much when it comes to climate change. Because what is happening? We have so much information about climate change. The impacts are there daily. We've identified it in the pool. You've just identified what is from all the responses that we had. We see that women and girls are the most vulnerable people to climate change. So if we are working on girls empowerment, women empowerment, we are also addressing climate change. We cannot say we address women empowerment without addressing climate change. It's not even possible. It's not possible. So we address climate change, address women empowerment. The two things, they are intersected. For example, I grew up, my parents, my mother was a farmer. I personally, I got into climate change because of what I saw with my own family. My mother was a smallholder farmer, but all the time they're complaining about the erratic rainfall. They didn't understand planting season again because we know the dry season. We generally know, I think Nigeria and Cameroon, we have the same season. So there's the dry season, there's the rainy season. And the dry season starts Start in mid-October and stop in early or mid-March. So mid-March, they start cultivating the crops. And I think by April, when the first rain comes, they plant. There's one time that in May and early June, rain had not fallen. So people had worked their crops and they were waiting for rain to plant. And that's the reason why we are in poverty. We are in the poverty cycle because we depend on the natural rain for our agricultural productivity. But in other countries, they use greenhouse gases. They have irrigation systems. The poor farmer, the smallholder farmer in Ebonyi State, that depends only on agriculture to support his family, to send for example, hypothetically speaking, there's a family in Ebonyi State. They have 6 children, 2 girls and 4 boys. What they do is, the father is a farmer, the mother is a farmer. They depend on rain-fed agriculture because that's what they sell to send their children to school. Now, rain is just not coming when it's supposed to come. The farm produce is so low. They don't have, so, I mean, maybe 5 years ago, they used to produce goods and sell for about, let's say 200,000 naira or 300,000 naira. At the end of the year, they have food to eat. They can send all their 6 children to school. Because of climate change, their farm produce has reduced. Now they can only earn 100,000 naira. Still with those 6 children, the economy is very bad. Inflation is so high, but they have 100,000 to send. Or the father said no. The father called the wife. He said, no, these girls that we have, they don't go to school this year. They need that we will send the boys to school, prioritize the boys. So in a typical African culture, I know Ebonyi State is the same. In most African, they'll say these girls, at the end of the day, they'll go and marry. So why are they sending them to school? That's what parents first think about. And that's what the organization is dealing with. They say they'll not send that girl to school. It's because of climate change. Imagine you go now, you go with a good project, you want to empower those girls. You don't take into account that the root cause of why the family is not sending the girls to school is because their income is dwindling. Their income is reducing. The financial capacity of the family, of the father is strained, is very strained. Of course, empowering the girls is very important. So we are actually, maybe we are treating the symptoms of, we're not looking at the root cause. So if we look at the root cause, how do you empower maybe that family to use maybe climate smart agriculture, use drought resistant seeds to plant for their farm so they can improve what their farm yields. If you improve their farm yields, the fathers will send their children to school. It changed the narrative. Like some people are just in dire situations because of their conditions. And sometimes when we don't think deep, when we don't look deep, we cannot identify some of these issues. So this is the reality of what is happening in Africa. We have no excuse. I don't have any excuse. Despite the fact that the information about climate change is everywhere. But a lot of people still don't know, especially the people who are suffering the most from climate change. They are feeling the impacts of climate change, but they don't know what is happening. 2 years ago in Cameroon, I don't know if you guys there's a Muslim community in Cameroon, in a certain village in Cameroon. So because rains delayed, there's this, there's the head of this, there's the imam. the imam, of course, there are mosques in Nigeria. There's an imam of this community that said that the rains did not come because of infidelity of women, of couples. That couples should do what? Couples should be faithful to their partners, or God will not send us rain. That is the notion that they had, those people in that community had. That's in the 21st century. That's the information that those people had. And look, we had a project, a certain farm project in that community. So there's still much to be done. I know SAF is in a position that they can do a lot. So this is the reality of what is happening in our community. It's not far-fetched. It's not so far-fetched. This is another statistic. Africa as a continent is least responsible for climate change, but is the continent on which the impacts will be felt the most. Now, let me do some science. Let me do some justice to science. Africa contributes less than 4% to global emission. But Africa is the most vulnerable continent. So we contribute the least to climate change, but we are suffering the most. That is the reality. It's our reality. There's no sugarcoating it. It's our reality. So what do? We contribute the least, but we suffer the most. So that's why in global conversation, when it comes to climate change, Africa, the position of Africa is that we need more of adaptation. So we need to deal with the impacts of climate change, because emissions that are caused here in Hamburg, in Germany, where I am, people in Ebonyi State will feel the impacts of climate. Emissions that are caused in Texas, in the US, people will feel the impacts of that climate in Anambra State. Emissions that are caused maybe in France, people will feel the impact of that climate change in Adamawa State. So you see some farmer in some village that has no, the footprint is so, the carbon footprint is very low, but he feels the impact of climate change. So in global conversations, now what we are clamoring for is that what should happen? We should be able to adapt to climate change. So we need to build adaptive capacity. We should be able to adaptation in every sector. We need to build resilient infrastructures. When flooding comes, we need more resilient infrastructure, because come and destroy schools. And those public schools, who are they going? Which people go to those public schools? They are the poor people. Most of those rich people, they don't send their children to public schools. So we are so vulnerable, and we are responsible to the least of this thing. It's really unfair. It's unfair, but that's the reality. That's the reality. So now what do? We build adaptation in various sectors. In the health sector, we need to build adaptation. In the infrastructure sector, we need to build adaptation. 60% of African economies, it depends on agriculture. We need to build adaptation in agriculture. We need drought-resistant crops that can help these farmers that are suffering from drought. We need to build a capacity against floods. We need to put financial risks mechanisms that can help them. Smallholder farmers, small businesses that will suffer from the impact of floods, of climate change. They need to get insurance. In some places in the West, when all these natural disasters are happening, those people just care for their life. Why do they care for their life? Insurance will cover all the damage. But go to Kenya. In Kenya, it was recently, I think 2 months ago, there were flood there. People were trying to save what? They're trying to save their properties, because there's no insurance that will cover those properties. So we need to build capacity. We need to build adaptation capacity, women empowerment. We need to empower the most vulnerable people to the impacts of climate change. That is women, girls, children, and boys. And the way, if you look at how our society is, our African society, we know the realities. Because of condition, families will prioritize boys over girls. That's just the reality in the face of climate change. I've just explained a small scenario. I hope that was clear enough. Like we said, And now let's talk about some disproportionate impact of climate change on women in Africa. I just wanted to talk about 3 sectors. And we've all identified these things in the poll. Food security. Food security. What is happening? Majority, my mother, for example, I come from a typical African family. My mother was a farmer. My mother was a smallholder farmer, not even a smallholder farmer. A smallholder farmer simply means that your produce is too small that in such a way that most of the time it's just to feed your family. Of course, my father was working, but my mother was a smallholder farmer. And if climate change is affecting agriculture the highest, because the majority of women are producers of food in Africa, especially in the rural area, droughts that are induced by climate change, disruption of agricultural yields, it will jeopardize food security for women and their families. It will jeopardize the education of girls. And in our homes, in most of our African homes, sometimes the mothers are the backbone of the family. This is what happens. And climate change, food security, because the mothers care about I don't know about some of your homes, but most of the time, the mothers are the people that look after the family in terms of food. Water scarcity, typically in Africa, women are responsible for collection of water in many African communities. These are statistics. I don't want to bring statistics here. In typical homes, women are responsible. And climate change is exacerbating water scarcity. It means that women will suffer more from this issue. Women will travel long distances to carry water. Women will sacrifice their education because of water scarcity. Workloads on women will increase, and it will put women at the risk of waterborne diseases. That is it. In Cameroon, do you know that in cities, for example, I come from Douala. I stay in Douala now. Douala is the economic capital of Cameroon, and it's a very low-lying coastal city. Floods are so common there. Like now, like floods are common. Do you know that what happens is that during floods, I realized that most of the fathers, they go them out. Like the fathers, during floods, I've witnessed this actually in Douala. Rain was falling and floods were already coming. So the water level was rising, was entering people's houses. I saw some fathers going out of the house. So who is left now in the house to take care of the children? It's the woman. So women are left with that burden to take care of the family. That is the role. You see how this happens. It also goes to health and well-being. Climate change impacts the health of girls, women, children more than boys, more than men. Let me not say more than boys, but they are more prone because they are more exposed, the kind of activities that they do. And studies have shown that the impact of climate change exacerbate gender-based violence. Gender-based violence. There are studies. I think I better showed a certain study. Like, I didn't want to put any data again. It is exacerbating gender-based violence. So if you are an organization working to reduce gender-based violence, and you don't look with the lens of climate change, you are just addressing the symptoms of some of these issues. If you are an organization working on health, don't look at climate change. You are addressing just the symptoms. Don't look at the root causes. So sometimes we really need to look deep in the work that we do in that community, what is happening in terms of climate change. And generally speaking, when it comes to the impacts of climate change in Africa, in most African societies, Ebonyi State is not left out, Anambra is not left out. These are some of the challenges that women face adapting to climate change. I've already said something about adaptation. When it comes to climate change, there are 2 things that you need to put in mind. Mitigation. Climate change mitigation simply means that we are doing everything we can to reduce emission the emission of those greenhouse gases that we talked about into the atmosphere. That is carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, chlorofluorocarbons, and all the likes. So we are doing action to reduce those emissions. That is climate change mitigation. So what do? We reduce the burning of fossil fuels. In fact, we stop the burning of fossil fuels. We switch to more sustainable alternatives, maybe renewable energy, solar, wind, all these things. We agricultural activities. We switch to sustainable practices that reduce the emission of methane. That is mitigation. We switch to maybe, they're talking about electric vehicles, to sustainable modes of transport. We can talk about cycling, active transport. Using what? You use public transport. If more people use public transport, number of cars will reduce emission overall. Those are some of the things. At the level of the homes, what do? We manage our waste well. At the level of the home, people are using their organic waste to make biogas for cooking at home, solving the energy crisis, and all these things. These are the things that we do. Now, that's mitigation. The adaptation is what? What are the actions that we take to be able to live with the impacts of climate change that already existed? What should we do to make sure that we are prepared to live in floods? When floods come, we are prepared to live in floods. When droughts come, farmers are prepared. When forest fires come, people are prepared. When all these things come, people are prepared. When water scarcity comes, we are prepared. That is adaptation. People are able to adapt to climate change. For example, you go to a community, maybe Abala in Bonny State, you give those farmers, because the major activity there is farming, you give those, and drought is one of the prevalent impacts of climate change. You give the farmers drought-resistant seeds or crops that can withstand droughts for longer periods of time. That's adaptation. And again, under adaptation, there's something they call resilience. How do you build the resilience of women? You empower them, economic empowerment. You train them, you empower them. What SAF is doing, that is building resilience of women and women and girls. That's what we do. But women still face a lot of challenges when it comes to adapting to climate change in Africa. The first thing is lack of resources, lack of access to resources. Women disproportionately face the lack of resources more than men. First of all, women often lack access to land, to technology, to financial resources that are needed to adapt to climate change. In some African societies, I don't know about Nigeria, women are not allowed to be landowners, so they cannot issue land titles in the name of women. That's another thing. Another challenge that is faced by women, I think these things are important for the work that SAP is doing. That's why I'm trying to maybe really highlight it. There's gender-based violence. Like I mentioned somewhere, climate change is exacerbating gender-based violence. It's exacerbating gender-based violence because women are more prone to displacement. And displacement is directly linked to gender-based violence. There are studies that have proven resource scarcity. Another serious challenge when it comes to women adapting to climate change in Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa, the scenario across is the same. Limited participation in decision-making. It doesn't go as more than that. There's still limited capacity. We are happy that more women are getting empowered. They're talking about climate issue. More women are getting into the climate action space. And it's so nice. But these women that are so vulnerable to climate change, children, girls, they need to be in the place of policy making. The decisions that they take, for example, there's a climate law in Nigeria. Do you guys know there's a climate law in Nigeria? There's a bill on climate change or something. I read that once. And it's like the government has even started a new department on climate change. I think most of this, like I know Lagos State has something that focuses on climate change, has like a department or something. I don't know. But I know one of those agencies, I know the one of Lagos State is headed by a woman. because I follow her on Twitter and I see the kind of work that is doing. Women, the kind of decisions that women make. If you look at COVID-19, if you look at globally speaking, women leaders that were handling their countries during COVID-19, they outperformed their male counterparts. It's not a joke. It's statistically proven. Look at the countries that are headed by women. They outperform in terms of addressing COVID-19, in terms of, I don't know, women are managed, it's a gift. So we need to get women to decision making. In our organization, these women, the leadership, there are more women than men. And I'm happy because what I realized, I've been in the climate space in Cameroon for 7-8 years. What I realized that when we started, the people that were more interested were boys. Men were more interested in climate change issue than girls because they don't show interest. But over the years, that statistics have changed. The people who do the most work in our organization are women. They are taking the spaces. They are taking this space. And they need to get into those spaces to make the decision. And another challenge faced by women adapting to climate change is social norms and traditional roles. Ebere has explained a lot about some of the traditional roles that we know in Abala Kiliki, and that's the reality. How do we break those social norms and traditional roles? And SAF is doing well, and we're happy that they are doing these things. These roles, these gender norms and traditional roles, it's limiting women's mobility, access to education, and opportunities to participate in climate change adaptation and mitigation efforts. For example, I'm married and I have my wife. My wife doesn't get to travel the way I travel. Maybe she's at her work job site. I don't know, but it's because, but these are just some of the reality. These social norms and traditional roles, it's so part of our society that sometimes it's even affecting the ability of women to adapt to climate change. Of course, I've had a fair share of traveling around the world, been to over 30 to 35 countries. But it's not the same maybe with a female counterpart. Because of the social norms and traditional roles, it doesn't need to be like that. And despite the fact that women face these many challenges adapting to climate change, we believe that women are agents of change. And women are leading change. Women are leading grassroots initiatives. Women are leading solutions. Women are doing a lot. I know a lot of Nigerian entrepreneurs, females, that have specifically worked in this climate space. There's even a fellow, an ISA fellow, Mam Chuku, I don't know if I call it well. She's doing a lot on climate change education. Her organization is doing so well. Those are women that inspire other women to get into the space. They're leading local initiatives, local community solutions. I identify 4 sectors because these are some of the most important sectors when it comes to Africa, to our communities. The first part is renewable energy. Do you know that in Nigeria, I read the statistics 2 to 3 months ago, more than 80 million people in Nigeria still lack access to electricity. It's not my statistics. It's even up to 100 million. The population of Nigeria is over 240, 50 million. Over 100 million people still lack access to electricity. How do we empower women that can pioneer renewable energy solutions? Solar energy, all these things, solar panel. They are entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs are starting businesses that are revolutionizing the adoption of solar energy in homes, in schools, in communities. I know of a lady in Nigeria that is leading microgrid solution in rural areas. Microgrids, because it will be impossible to electrify the whole of Nigeria with the national grid. It's not possible. We can do a model, we can simulate the data. It will take a whole lot of money that the government doesn't have. So what can we prioritize? You can prioritize renewable energy solution, microgrid and mini grid to increase access to electricity in rural areas. And women can champion that. Women can pioneer that. Maybe one of the girls in the girl adoption project decide that she wants to learn renewable energy. She wants to learn this solar business. She wants to start a solar business and producing clean energy, supplying clean energy to communities in Abakala, in that village, in that community. That is what they do. So they can have access to capital. They can have the technical skills. SAF can find, maybe do something and partner with some organization. They are trained. They receive some seed capital. They start their businesses. And women are already doing that. I know a couple of women in Nigeria. There's one lady they call Glory. I think she's in the US now. She's an Obama scholar. And she's doing a lot when it comes to renewable energy. And she's just one among many of them. So we are solving the need of the community, and we are empowering women, empowering communities, empowering families. There's sustainable agriculture. We all know that majority of everything we identified in that pool was about farming. There's climate smart agriculture. How women are leading the development and implementation of climate smart agricultural practices, agroforestry. These are things that women can do. I know of a lady in Nigeria that is into industrial production of cassava. Her plan, I don't know, I've forgotten her name, but those are women, and she's empowering other women. Those are things that women are inspiring other communities. The next thing is community-based adaptation. I know I've gotten so long, but you guys should forgive me. I'll round up as soon as I can. Women actually are actively getting involved in community adaptation solutions. It's important. Women are developing the technical skills. More women get scholarships now to study these complicated things, early warning systems. They're doing PhD. Women are getting into these things. That's important. They are like, they'll be like torchbearers in the communities, empowering other women and other girls. They can. I know SAF is looking for women that can be mentors to the girls that is part of your project. If we have some of these women that are into this renewable energy thing, that are empowered, they can be real role models to the other girls in the community. And another most important thing, climate education and awareness. Women are taking over in Nigeria, in Cameroon, everywhere. Like I said, I gave my own experience. When I started, I got to the university, I was just passionate. When I started this climate change, when I started getting into the climate change movement, I started a team. In our team, we were like I think 7 or 9 of us. Almost all of us were men. There were just 2 girls there. Girls were not showing any interest. I don't know why. But that thing has changed. We have more girls than men, more girls than boys, more women than men. Because when women are empowered, the likelihood of them creating a ripple effect of empowerment is more than that of men. It's very more. I know this from statistics, from my own experience. And women are getting more into climate education and awareness. So these are important things. Women are also starting businesses. I could mention a lot of businesses a lot of solutions that young people can get into, women can get into, addressing climate change, but they are also generating income for themselves. So these are some of the realities of what we are seeing in our communities. Women as agents of change in a grassroots initiative. And honestly speaking, climate change, there's no way we can just neglect it because we are living it daily. I don't know if there's heat waves in Cameroon, in Nigeria, but the heat waves in Cameroon nowadays, and heat waves have been found to affect girls more than boys because of their because of the nature of women. Heat waves affect women more than girls, more than boys. That's the reality. And heat waves are becoming so rampant nowadays. There are cities in Cameroon that in the past, you did not need a fan or an AC. But you cannot stay without a fan or an AC. It's not even possible. because of the increase of temperatures. So these are some of the things that we can be doing. We can be doing. We can be doing to empower women to get into these spaces. I just mentioned, I know SAF is doing a lot, but I just mentioned a couple. Financial inclusion. Financial inclusion is very important. Education and training, very important. I know you're doing a lot of education and training. It's important. This is part of the education and training. It's important. There are a lot of programs out there that your team members, people in SAP or the girls can get. Maybe when you are doing, if girls are being trained on some of these skills, they should also learn climate change. They should be empowered. Climate-related fields, it's important. It's so important. And you cannot, they always say that you cannot teach something you don't know. And I'm happy that Ebere said I should come and talk. I know it's important because sometimes when we get in, sometimes the information around climate change is so overwhelming. The information is everywhere and then it's still not there. The information is overwhelming a lot of people. People are not able to streamline or maybe to dissect that information to be relevant to them. Climate change information is overwhelming. It's all over the internet. But how do you streamline that knowledge to be relevant to you, to your community, to your organization? It's that important. I understood a lot about SAP because I've heard Ebere talk about it and I know the project she's working on. So I tried as much as possible I didn't just want to come and bring scientific facts here. No, I wanted us to look at how this thing can be relevant to the work you do. And this sometimes you don't find it. I see a lot of course, it's important because when it comes to climate change, I always tell my people that we need to think globally because climate change is global, but we need to act locally because the impacts of climate change are felt locally. And the impacts are not felt proportionately. The impacts of climate change to someone in Germany is not the same impact of climate change to someone in Lagos or to someone in Jabi or anywhere, or in Ebonyi State. But we need to act in relation to how the impacts of climate change are being felt. And people relate more to the kind of information that is relevant to them. For example, when it comes to, I do a lot of climate change education. When it comes to educating people on climate change, you need to make sure that that information is relevant to them. Because if you are talking to local farmers about climate change and you keep mentioning fossil fuels, they don't know what fossil fuel is. They'll be disconnected from it. And this is something that I've noticed, especially with activists, with a lot of activists. They want to copy the model of activism of the West and bring it to Africa. Sometimes it will not work. It cannot work. For example, protest is common in the West. Protest might not necessarily work in Nigeria. I can tell you, protest will not work in Cameroon. Protest, you will get arrested. And we get arrested, no, they can even, we get arrested. No, maybe your family will never hear from you. Because, for example, if I have a friend, like our finance director of our organization, she's in the US, she took part in a march in New York. And she was arrested almost 3 times. But there's a lot of legal instruments, a lot of legal things that are available to her. She was released. I was not charged with anything. But do that same thing in some of our contents. I don't want to say it because this thing we made public. But you might not live to tell the story. So climate action is context specific. I tell people, think about climate change globally, but you should act locally. It should be relevant. And like I just saw on the group that protests in Nigeria, those are not my words. It's a death sentence in Nigeria, seriously. I honestly feel that this is what sometimes is missing. Protests are good. We know what happened during the NSAS protest. I cannot say it. I was following that protest on a minute-by-minute basis, Twitter, Facebook, and I have a lot of acquaintances in Nigeria. So sometimes some of these tools that are available to other people might not work to us. I cannot just copy blindly. So we think globally, they act locally. Think globally. Think that climate change is global. It's a global phenomenon. But the impacts of climate change, they are disproportionate. And the way we address it is context specific. And the action that's, for example, my organization focusing on climate change education, awareness, training, empowerment. You might not see us in a protest. We are doing climate change work. You get it? This is what it is. And sometimes I feel like our people, sometimes they get so excited with some of these things. I'm really being real here with some of. I've seen what is happening in the US, seen what's happening in Europe, seen what's happening in Africa, seen what's happening in Latin America. They are context specific. And for us at the International Student Environmental Coalition, one thing I pride what our work in is that we don't tell people what to do to address climate change. No. Address climate injustice. No. When people are empowered, they know that this is the reality of climate change. They design their own solution based on their context. So we don't have any playbook for countries. No, we don't have any playbook. We can have common projects, but it's different. The way they do climate action in Brazil or Italy, because our organization in Italy, what they do is different from what we do in Cameroon. The realities are different. This is what we do. An organization working on guest empowerment or guest education in Europe, in Africa, in America, if they're incorporating climate change in their work, it's not the same way SAF will incorporate climate change in their work. No, not. Because the realities of climate change in Ebonyi State is different from an organization working in France or maybe in the US. So we need to take this into consideration. It's quite very important. So these are some of the issues that we need to be able to use to empower women. Through these resources, we can access to education. We can unlock the potential of women, and they'll lead climate action in Africa. They'll address girls' issue, girls' education, gender-based violence, girls' adoption project. Girls' adoption project. I'm not saying that SAFU, the organization, has a mission and a vision. We are not saying that SAF should start doing climate change. No. For example, I cannot go into women empowerment. Though the work we do, it goes to women empowerment. The trainings we have, most of the people who come to those trainings are women. But I'm not doing women empowerment. We're doing climate action, but it's intersecting into other sectors. So sometimes it's really good that we consider it. And I'm happy that Ebere said I should come and share some thoughts with you all. This is what we can actually do. These are some of the thoughts that I wanted us to share. This is very important. I know for example, here in Germany, we've talked a lot about strengthening leadership, women's leadership in climate change policy making. This one is good, but I won't talk so much on this because, of course, there are gender responsive policies. I know Ebere has shared. I know she's working on a whole lot of things when it comes to how your programs can be gender responsive, and because we've done a couple of workshops here, it's important. It's very important. Increasing representation, capacity building. These are some things that we don't need to mention a lot. I also look at innovative financing mechanism to support women-led initiatives. Green bonds, this was more technical. Climate funds, impact investing, I won't say much of it. Partnerships and collaboration. There's no way in this. See, one thing I've realized in the climate space or in the NGO sector, civil society sector, no organization is an island. You cannot work alone. And the issues of only Ebonyi State, you people cannot solve it all. So partnership, it also comes to climate change and equality. Partnerships and collaboration is so important. I like that the way you guys are doing partnerships and collaboration. It's good. Government and civil society, you need to work together. I had a mentor. The mentor was I have a mentor who is from Kenya, and she worked with the UN, I think, for 30 years. So I was discussing with her. She told me that, Harrison, when don't just be working on your problem and don't put the everything at the end of the day, everything will go back to the government. So we cannot run away from the government. We need to work with the government. And we need to start engaging them as early as possible in our projects, in our initiatives. We need to look for innovative ways to work with the government. Because there are issues that one policy can strike out. The issue they are trying to address, one policy by the government will strike it out. Imagine you get a senator on board. He tables a bill in parliament, or maybe in Ebonyi State House of Representatives, get some local assembly member, he buys into the vision and take his colleagues along, and they champion it to the National Assembly. That one thing will change a lot of things. Of course, what we are doing is good, because civil society actually keeps government in. Without, I don't know if how our world would be without civil society. Because sometimes people are so lost. Civil society that bring into attention most of these things. International cooperation is also very good in terms of the work you do and driving climate and gender equality, climate action. Like maybe SAF now is partnering with ISA, and I know Ebere is also looking for other collaborators. Maybe ISEC can partner with ISA, with SAF at some point. Cameroon is not far from Nigeria, can have some projects and all those things. Even if not ISEC, I can recommend some organizations that could support SAF. That is international collaboration. Private sector engagement. I like the model of which maybe donors are coming, companies are able to support the girls and all that. That is private sector engagement, important. And again, the local communities. I think what I've also realized that projects that succeed the more, that have a very high rate of success, and they are more impactful, are the projects that are owned by the local communities. That's when you involve the local communities from the beginning of the project, local stakeholders. It's very important. Collaboration with the local communities. You don't go empower girls and the communities are not involved. No. For the community, those girls are not living in the air. They are living in those communities. Even climate action projects. You don't go and train maybe women on, go and select a group of women and train them on climate smart agriculture. And they are not in space. They are living in a community, and that community is important. So they need to be like getting communities involved is very important. Another very important thing, I saw these pictures on Facebook. I took these pictures because of what has been happening to, what happened to Vanessa Nakate in 2019 or 2020. A picture was cropped off a certain image by this global organization because she was Black. And that is the kind of discrimination that maybe Black girls, Black women, they face. It still goes back to women issue. The voices of African women in these global climate conversations. The opportunities that people in the global north have, does that happen to people in the global south? And I'm happy that the narrative is changing. So women need to get into global platforms. Women need to get media engagement, knowledge sharing. Women need to share knowledge with their peers. And to conclude, I know it's been so long, but I wanted to conclude with that we can integrate gender equality into climate action. We can change the narrative in terms of climate action, incorporating climate action, gender equality, because sometimes I see how people want to separate climate action and gender equality. It's like two sides of the same coin. Because when we look at the impacts of climate change, it closely related to the SDG that says gender equality. But we need to be able to make it our goal, like make it our focal issue when it comes to our projects. Like we did a workshop, they were talking about gender equality, but I didn't hear about climate action. So these are very important things that we should be able to do in the work that we do. And like I said, I just wanted to share some of these thoughts with you. And I hope that it has given you maybe some ways to think again about the work we do, how climate change can be an issue, how climate action can be a core of the work you do. I'm not saying that SAF should go into climate action, but you as individuals, you as people, as an organization, how do we change this narrative? How do we make sure that climate action is at the core of the work we do? That we don't see climate change like a silo, like my organization is not working on climate change. No. So these are some of the issues that I think that are really important. And the final thing I wanted us to reflect on, maybe a couple of people could share, maybe based on the experience on the work you're doing. And I wanted you to think about this. How does SAF incorporate or foster climate action through or in the work you do? That's my ending question that maybe we can reflect now. If there's any questions, we can answer and maybe some discussions. So thank you so much. And I end for here. Like we say in Cameroon.
I'm giving
Okay.
you a German round of applause.
No, I'm not there. All right. So I can stop sharing my screen. Okay. All right.
Oh wow, this was really nice. I did not expect anything less anyway, but it was really good. It was really detailed. Please, if people should let me know how you feel in the comment section. Give me one word that explains this particular presentation to you. Tell me how you feel, what you think. Give us feedback in the comment section. Let me know how you feel. Let him see our reactions in the comment section. Yeah, Modesta said enriched. Yeah, I'm still waiting. I'm waiting for you to send me your feedback. Let's see your feedback in the comment section. Thank you very much, Harrison. This was really, it was very rich. It was very rich, to be honest. To be honest, it's a lot, and it's something everybody has to go back again to listen to again and again. And yeah, so I just wanted to point out something because I'm sure that some of you on the team will be very surprised, like, why are we suddenly discussing climate? Climate. Are we not talking about child marriage and teenage pregnancy? You know, but I think maybe I've always really been interested in climate education, but it's just like Harrington said, you can't be doing everything, you can't be everywhere. But personally, I've seen how climate um, change has impacted our environment. I've always seen it, and it has really given me a cause for concern. Yeah, and then now seeing how bad things are going, especially with the recent hunger in Nigeria, and not just in Nigeria, to be honest, everywhere. The high cost of food. I mean, ugu for for God's sake, ordinary pepper. I still cannot stop talking about this pepper. I've been talking about it since yesterday. Pepper, 50 naira is now like there's no 50 naira pepper anymore. There's no 100 naira pepper anymore. It's crazy. I cannot believe it. Like, I think that is the shocker for me that really made me, and I'm like, no, we really have to do something, because I know that it's just a lot. When you work in the social sector, right, and you face a lot of challenges, you see problems. One thing that I've come to learn is you are not fixated on a particular kind of model. So
Yeah.
you adapt with the situation of things, right? So now we've been in SAF, like I mentioned, I think I mentioned it yesterday. When we started SAF, we started fighting child marriage, teenage pregnancy. You have to go to school, you must do this. And then we realized, okay, hold up. The problem is not just that these girls don't want to go to school. It's a mindset thing. It's marginalization, cultural, and then we now drifted a little bit. We've done a lot of different kind of approaches to try this, try that, to just keep trying to see what actually works based on the situation. And now, seeing the situation of things, that's why I decided see, we have to do something about climate change. And I thought about it. I said, instead of bringing people to come and train our girls, it's better to train the team. Right. So when the team is really empowered and grounded with respect to climate change, the urban farming like we did yesterday, and then the team on their own start practicing these things and learning more, becoming more grounded, then we can now train our girls, right? So it's not like we are going to change our course and stop talking about child marriage or anything, but climate education is really a very strong tool that we can also use to address female girl child empowerment, right? So if we can find ways to teach girls about climate change and the farming that we talked about yesterday, I think it's way more sustainable because now we have girls that have skills, but we don't have money to set up businesses for them yet. God willing, we'll be able to get funding. But what if we get funding once and we don't get it again?
Yeah.
Right? So I feel like there are more sustainable ways. Abakaliki is well known for agriculture. They're very good in agriculture. And even if these girls don't have land, like you mentioned, that most women don't have land, they can start with the smart climate, what do they call it? The smart farming that we did yesterday. Starting from where you are and just doing something for yourself. So I hope this explains why we are suddenly talking about climate education. So if the team is empowered, we have some of our team that are in school. We have Uzioma that is here that already started her own small garden. And I'm sure that other people will follow suit, right? So if we can start on our own to start practicing the things that we are talking about, eventually, I know that this particular presentation was a little bit very general, right? Now, we did not go deep to start talking about, okay, so we said bio waste can increase methane. So how do people dispose their waste now? They have waste, so what do they do with it? They can't do open burning. So how do you teach them to do this? I know we did not go into all those nitty-gritty, but hopefully we'll have more sections. And now, just like you mentioned about partnership, we are also going to, formally, we would have to partner eventually with ISEC or Machuku's organization. I don't know. I think they're a little bit more streamlined. They are very concerned about finance, and funding. And I think ISEC is a lot more big, right? So I know you have your branches in different countries of the world, right? So we could start with have one with staff as well, have training so that where we can now go deep and say, okay, instead of burning, this is what you do. Instead of using firewood, this is what you use to cook. And these are ways that can be, that will not cost you. You can actually, just like we talked about the farming yesterday, and we saw that you could actually make your own fertilizer, your own pesticides. It was really it was really exciting to learn, and even use bags to have your own farm and just grow things. That is why we are talking about organic farming. So if you could also have something like that with respect to waste management, ways that people can actually properly dispose their waste without harming the environment, and then ways that people can what's it called use, what is the word, firewood or gas, or people that are most people in the villages, what they use is firewood, right? So but I know
Yeah.
that firewood is also not very healthy because of deforestation, because of the firewood itself produces carbon monoxide, and all those other things. So if there are alternative ways that these things can be done, I'm hoping that, God willing, when we reach out to you for partnership, you could collaborate with SAF and you could handle that aspect for SAF, the aspect of climate education, while we continue to focus on what we do with girls' education and other things. Yes. So thank you very much once again for the wonderful presentation. It was really an eye-opener. And I also like the where you talked about thinking globally and acting locally to be context specific. In the last conference where I spoke on, I remember I talked about this thing you said about um, protest, right? So I was saying that because these things work in other places, we already know where we come from. So we cannot come and try to replicate these things. You know, I remember I cited Nnamdi Azikiwe when he said that even the independence of Nigeria did not require violence. It took what's the word? Why is English failing me? Negotiations, right? Diplomacy. Yeah, that's the word. It took diplomacy, and he he learned that act of you know when we learned these negotiation skills here, right? So he said he learned it when he traveled to the UK for studies, and that was what they actually used to successfully secure Nigerian independence. But many people are not good students of history, right? So we don't see these things and we think that we want to do it by force. Africans, we are not like the whites that do all those. We need to really understand our context and apply knowledge like it should. Yeah, so that's what I just wanted to point out again. And thank you very much. I think it's time for questions. Does anybody have any questions to ask Harrison before I ask my own? And we have people that will win our prizes for today. So I'm seeing comments: climate change simplified, job breaking, very enlightening, very insightful, impactful, enriched. Thank you for breaking the ambiguous climate change. Ambiguous indeed. Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Does anybody have any question for Mr. Harrison? Or should I go ahead and ask?
Can I ask, or I should type in the message box?
Yeah, you can ask. Just go ahead and ask.
Okay, I don't know what time it is in Germany, but it's afternoon here. Good afternoon, Mr. Harrison. Good afternoon. So my question is, when you were speaking, you spoke about like how like agriculture is like one of the biggest causes of climate change in some countries, right? Especially in Africa here. How is it possible to foster, or how can we foster, like should I call it, well, I'm trying to look for the right word to use, a safer agricultural practices, rather, since, like, this side of the world is largely dependent on agriculture. And then how are we going to be able to foster like safer agricultural practices, like in relation to climate change?
Okay, can I go ahead and answer, Ibere?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for the nice comments and appreciative words. And I just wanted to say again that, like, before I made this presentation, I didn't know what, because Ebere just told me that I should talk about climate change. And climate change is as broad as it gets. So I just wanted to mention like some key issues that could be related to the work of SAF. And of course, there are a lot of technical things that I could mention, but I didn't know that of course, there can be more conversations or more sessions in future to address some key issues. For example, we talk about waste management. What are sustainable waste management practices that people can do at the level of their homes? Production of biogas. Production of biogas is very easy. Biofertilizers, like you said, very easy. Compost is very easy. And those are things people can do. And to come to Chigozi's question, and it is like, I don't know about Nigeria, but over 40, I think 45% of the national emission of Cameroon is from the agricultural sector. And I'm not sure the agricultural sector is first in Cameroon, in Nigeria, but when it comes to the agricultural sector, they group it into, they call it AFOLA, agriculture, forestry, and land use. It's the grid, they join all these things together and consider the emissions together. Now, like you said, agriculture is the backbone of Africa's economy. What are the sustainable practices that can be put in place for us to address our hunger issues, but not causing emission? You get it? Because at the end of the day, it's to meet our basic needs. It's to meet our food challenges. Africa is the highest continent that is suffering from food insecurity. Our continents depend on agriculture for food security. but we are doing it unsustainably. What can we do? There are sustainable farming practices that can be done. We just need to look at it. For example, the agricultural sector, a major source of emission is the use of fertilizers from the agricultural sector in African countries. There are biofertilizers now. They talk about biofertilizers. Like we said, there's biofertilizer, compost, and that can be used to replace these synthetic fertilizers. That is one way. That is something that can be done. Another thing that I think there are organic farm practices that increases crop yields without increasing emission. These are some things that people can be talking about. For example, we have a fellow here in Germany. He's working on biochar. Biochar is so rich in organic, content that it's important for agriculture. These are some of the indigenous practices that we can use to increase our food productivity without necessarily causing harm to the environment. That's one thing. There's also agroforestry. We cannot separate maybe agriculture from forestry. That's why nowadays you hear people talk about agroforestry. They need to work together. And the last thing I want to mention is that when we talk about agriculture, people forget that cattle rearing is also part of agriculture. Cattle rearing produces a lot of methane. That's why maybe when you go to international climate conferences, they say everyone to be vegan, everyone should be vegan, everyone should be vegan. There's always groups like in this conference or party, there's always a group that says that everyone should be vegan. But if you want to understand why they're saying that everyone should be vegan, it's because cattle rearing, meat, beef that we eat, the process produces a lot of methane. And methane, I mentioned in the presentation that methane is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas in a period of 100 years, which means that methane is more dangerous. And that's why when you go to some landfills, I know about some landfills in Nigeria, when the organic waste decompose, what do? They burn that methane to produce carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide goes into the atmosphere. So it is a less potent gas. So they are saying that they are reducing the emission, but they are still producing methane. So another thing that we could do is look at the cattle rearing sector. In Europe, what they are doing to reduce emission in that sector is they are looking at more productive cattle breeds. Africa, for example, Africa is a continent that has the cattle breeds that we have in Africa that's the least productive in the world. So if you take a cattle in Europe, and let me go to America from where I've seen the statistics. A cattle in America produces 30 to 35 times more milk than a cattle species in Africa. It produces 15 times less methane than a cattle species in Africa. So I read a global study. They were saying that improved species should be given to African farmers. Improved species should be supplied to African farmers. That's another thing. So the agricultural sector, I think these are some of the things that maybe when it comes up in conversation, we can consider. But of course, Chigozie mentioned something very important. You people are talking, I heard that tomato is scarce in Nigeria. Tomato is scarce. Tomato is scarce in Cameroon, is scarce everywhere. Tomato space is so scarce. And people don't know that climate change is affecting tomato. One thing that they're doing, there's a company in Cameroon is constructing tomato in greenhouse farms. And climate change is like, so greenhouse is like, it's a controlled environment and the productivity is very high. These are some things that can be encouraged. We are reducing emission, but we need to survive. We need to solve food insecurity. And then another thing that I would say is that we need to go back to indigenous practices. Because the reason why we are so less productive is because we try to copy practices of the West, failing to understand that the West is different. Our climate is different from that of the West. We need to go back to the things that we used in the past. For example, there's a study that says that there are crops in Africa that are drought resistant, that are only particular to Africa that we can use to solve our food needs. I give an example. When the war in Ukraine started, do you know most African governments, they were complaining about the hike in food prices because of the war in Ukraine. Why? Ukraine supplies more than 60% of wheat to Africa. You can imagine. And there's a crop that we cultivate in cassava, in Cameroon, in Africa, cassava. I don't know if you have cassava in Nigeria. Cassava is one of the only African crops that is climate resilient, that is not affected by climate change. That's one of the few crops of Africa. We could cultivate cassava in large quantities and at industrial scale to be able to meet our need for wheat. There are people are doing, but they're not getting the kind of support that they need. Indeed. So Chigos, I'm sorry that I like to think globally. I like to look at the whole continent and look at solutions that are really possible. But locally, what can local farmers do? Maybe a small farmer in Aba. How do they call that place? Please call it a better. One more time.
Abakaliki. I've been calling these things since March for you.
Abakaliki. Okay. What can a smallholder farmer in Abakaliki do to improve their food productivity? Because at the end of the day, is to satisfy their need. What can they do to reduce their climate impact, but also satisfying their family needs? These indigenous practices that we're talking, these biofertilizers that we're talking, and unfortunately, you know that most of those farmers, they don't have money to buy synthetic fertilizers. They need to resort back to what they know, those indigenous fertilizers, those farm practices that are, they call them climate smart. You people talk about, I don't know what they talk about urban gardening yesterday, but those are things that we can use. So yeah, that's what I can say.
I'm giving you
Thank
German.
you. Thank you very much.
Does anybody have any more questions? Any other question? Yeah, so I'm just feeling like this, our retreat was divinely orchestrated. I don't know if anybody else is feeling like that. Say amen. I feel like it's divinely orchestrated because how did we talk about climate smart agriculture? And it's not like we did this planning, like that everything will go hand in hand. Because now it's looking like the introduction we had yesterday was very important because that's everything that we were taught yesterday about organic farming is looking like that is actually, being climate sensitive. I don't know if there's a term like that, right? So yeah, this is a very good progress. We are making progress in the right direction, and I'm really excited for everything we are going to do in the future following this particular retreat. Yes. Does anybody else have any other questions for Harrison? No questions. So like we did yesterday, if you have, I don't think you'll be able to join the live like we did yesterday. So you just hurriedly drop your answer in the comment section or just raise your hand. Just raise your hand. Okay, let's do that. So the first person to raise their hand will be the person answer. Okay, I think there's a question here. Are there some crops that can be planted that can mitigate climate change, like reduce the content of CO2 in the atmosphere? Harrison, I think this is like non-DASIS projects, reforestation and all. Do you have an answer to this, Harrison?
I could definitely just give maybe say something. Of course, by nature, crops absorb carbon. The process of photosynthesis absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and produce oxygen. They use that carbon dioxide to manufacture carbohydrate. That's the simple process that happens in nature. And what is happening is that let me give for example in Cameroon. There are crops that do very well in particular climates, particular environments. And so they are able to absorb more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere when they are planted in particular environment. I don't know about Nigeria, but example, in Cameroon, we have something they call zone ecologique, how they call it in English again. There are 5 agroecological zones in Cameroon. So the country is split into 5 agroecological zones. And in each of these zones, the climate, the temperatures, the humidities are different. So the government actually, there's a Ministry of Agriculture that recommends particular crops that will be good in every agroecological zone. So there are zones in Cameroon that you cannot plant granite. Granite will not do well. And if granite doesn't do well, planting it, you would spoil the soil, because there's something that they call soil organic carbon. If you plant crops, because the soil that we see, it stores enormous amount of carbon. Enormous amount of carbon. So if that amount of carbon is released into the atmosphere, it still causes the emission. You get it? So if you plant crops that are not favorable for that soil, the soil organic carbon is reduced, and that carbon is going into the atmosphere, which is terrible, which is very terrible. So I'm just giving an example for Cameroon. I don't know about Nigeria, but generally speaking, the process, like I said, I talk about cassava. Cassava is climate resilient in all of Africa. It's in all of Africa. And cassava used in producing flour, or what they call wheat flour from cassava, is, they say it has, I saw a study that said it has zero or gluten or something. So it's more like, it's more good, it's good. So, but to say again, Kennedy is asking about crops that can be, it's not unique to all of Africa. I've just explained to you an example, but what they're encouraging now is agroforestry. So agriculture and forestry, they should work together. So we are planting trees that will help crops to do well. We plant trees that help crops to perform well. That's agroforestry. So our crops are performing well, the trees are growing and they're absorbing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And those trees, the trees that they encourage, is unique to every climate. It's unique to every climatic zone. So the tree that will be planted in Lagos, a tree might do well in Lagos, but you go to Anambra State, it will not do well. It will not be favorable for the climate. So these are some of the things that we need to consider. Agroforestry, what Kennedy said, is something that I would maybe he might want to do more research on it, but that's something that we have to consider.
Okay, thank you very much for doing justice to that. I just wanted to mention something. This is like Mother Nature telling us what it wants. If a particular crop is not doing well in a particular area, don't just bother planting it there. It means Mother Nature is telling you something, but we always want to find ways around it. And at the end of the day, if you look at, from what I'm sensing, it's like we are going back to the original way we've been doing this farming thing. Because even this agroforestry now, an image is just coming to my mind, farmlands that we used to have then growing up, they grow trees and plants together. So it's like normal. I remember when we go to harvest yams those days, we have trees where you sit under. Maybe we roast yam or we just sit there to put the yams together and all those things. So it's just like, it's a way of telling us to revert back to nature, to how we've always done it, right? So I also wanted to say something. You mentioned talking about wheat. So, wheat doesn't do well in Nigeria. I don't know about the African countries. I don't think it does well in the tropics. It's only in the temperate regions. That's where wheat really does well. And I know that my undergraduate project work was trying to develop something that we could use to replace wheat. So I know I tried to use what I am to do chin. And now the issue is, because of the gluten you mentioned, we have gluten in wheat. gluten is just a protein. It's a type of protein, right? So, but gluten is not in cassava. It's not in yam.
Yeah.
And yeah, and because of what gluten actually does is, when you use flour to bake maybe meat pie or bread or chin chin, all those our snacks, when you knead your flour, you find out that the dough is stretching, right?
Mhm.
So that dough that is stretching is actually a function of gluten. So, and the benefit of that is that when you keep it and your dough is supposed to rise, especially for something like bread and donuts, that rising, it can trap your carbon dioxide so that your bread can rise. If it doesn't have wheat, if it doesn't have gluten, it cannot rise. You see, so that is the problem. That is why it's like wheat is very important. I remember it was Goodluck Jonathan during his time that was really trying to find, because it's high importation. And now with inflation and the high rise in dollar, it's even making it worse. That's why bread is now up to 2,000 naira for one bread, because of the inflation and because wheat has to be imported. Because without wheat, that bread will not rise. And if they use cassava only to do bread, you will not buy it. You will not like it. I've tried it. I used what I am to do chin chin. It was good though. We ate it, but it was not as good as the chin chin you eat with your other, that is made with other flour. So that's the challenge. That's the problem, honestly. It was Goodluck Jonathan that decided, okay, instead of just using only wheat, he started this policy where we use only 25% wheat. So our flour, the multi-purpose flour you see in the market in Nigeria, I don't know if it's still being implemented, it's 75% cassava and 25% wheat. That was all Goodluck Jonathan could do to reduce the importation of wheat in Nigeria then. Yeah, so, but just like you said, we could, channel our strengths, do more of cassava, plant more of cassava or do whatever it is we can do. And that thing I also wanted to add to what you said is this morning, because Mama visited me, and on our way from the apartment to work, so I was showing how we're talking about urban farming in Europe. So urban farming in Europe, especially Germany here, is it's not just like the gardening. So what they do is the roof of the house. Most houses have grasses. You know the thing we call carpet grass in Nigeria. So most houses have grasses on top of the roof of the house. Every house has a place for grass. I can show you here. I don't know let me see if I can show you people here what I mean. Right. Let me see. Okay. Oh, but I'll flip my camera. Um, I'm trying to flip my camera so I can show you people what I don't know if people can see. Let me know if you can see outside here. Can you people see what I'm showing you? Can you people hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
You can see.
Yeah, okay. So if you see this small house here, this is like where this house is like for the waste, right? You can see it where they put all the waste, but you see on top of the house, they made provision to grow grasses just on top of this small house. I hope you can see it clearly. Hope you can see it clearly. So this is an example of what I wanted to show you people. So this is their own version of urban farming, right? And even though they also grow, they also have the garden and other things. But this is an example of what I was actually talking about with her. And that thing they also do here in terms of climate is we noticed, like she was telling me, if you are as you are moving, you'll be seeing something that looks like small river along the road, river, lake. She was like, those things are artificial waters that they just created to cool the environment, because this Hamburg is like is the heart of the country, just like Lagos, right? So, and it can tend to become very hot because of the population living here. So they have water. They just created artificial water in between. So that is why when he was talking about climate change in Europe and climate change in Africa, they are two different things. So how it affects them here it's not how it's affecting us. But you can also see that they are making efforts. Everybody is making effort to contribute the little they can. So you build a house, you have your small garden. You build your house, you have your small garden. Don't cut all the trees in your compound because you want to have parking space. No, you have small trees. You have, all those small things in between. Those are some of the ways. And one thing that Loretta mentioned this morning, regarding the question that was asked about trees that take up more CO2, that the research found out that the urban farming that was done in the cities actually took up more CO2 than the ones that were being done in large scale in the villages. I don't know if it's because of the species of plants they were planting, crops they were planting or something, but that was what the research said. So this, it will go a very long way to tell you how our little effort how far it can go with respect to climate action and protecting the environment. Yes, so I just wanted to chip in that to what Harrison already said. Definitely would have more training, and God willing, we'll be able to join his coalition of students so that we can get properly educated, so that we can also educate people around us, educate our girls in our leadership club, in all our mentorship sections. That is how the message spread, and that is how people's mindsets can begin to change, and we have new, better attitudes towards protecting our environments.
Okay, Ebere, I wanted just to add something on what you've said, and it's so important that you said you were talking with, if you look at the houses in Europe, there are green spaces there. All houses, when you construct a house, there's supposed to be a percentage of green space in your house, like a certain number of trees. If you look at the balconies, most of them have trees. It goes back to the building code. If you look at the building code used in Europe, which is wide in the country, like in the European Union, those things are part of their building codes. And that's why I just wanted to mention this, because you see, policy can actually do a lot. Policy is very important. That's what, for example, I don't know if there's a civil engineer here, if there's any civil engineer here. I don't know the building code that is used in Nigeria, but in Cameroon, we used to use like the Euro codes. And the Euro codes for our construction, when engineers are designing our houses, there are parts that they choose. They choose parts of the beauty of that code and implement whatever they want to implement. So it's just so important. I just wanted to mention this. It can be just about the importance of every sector is involved in this. Maybe a civil engineer might be saying that they're not involved in climate action. They are involved in climate action. There's something now they talk about green buildings. I know there are a couple of big green buildings in Nigeria, in Lagos, for example, that are certified as green buildings. They change the narrative. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Yes, and talking about policy, I don't know how many of us saw the new policy that the federal government of Nigeria have on milk production and cattle rearing. I know you mentioned something like that. I said I was going to say it. I saw it earlier this week. So we have a new policy on, and the goal is to be able to improve crossbreeding, because Nigeria does not produce milk. I hope you know that. That's why milk is expensive. We don't produce milk currently in Nigeria. All our milk is imported, right? So,
Wow.
but we just we have a new policy now that is on dairy, for national dairy. They said it's a national dairy policy, and also for livestock management. Yes. So, and thank God for once we're not talking about, what was that bill again that we had from the last thing about allowing cattle to just walk around. I've forgotten what the bill was about. Right. So thankfully for once we are doing something more productive. Yes. So I just felt it was something for us to note. Yes. So our question, first question is hmm. So our speaker told us about, he started talking with climate, talked about the weather. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so our speaker talked about climate, weather, greenhouse effects, and climate change, greenhouse gases, so many things. So there was something he said, without it, life will not exist on Earth, in this planet. Does anybody remember what he said? Without it, life will not exist. I just listed out all the terms, some of the terms he mentioned when he started as introduction. And I mentioned it. So can anybody remember which of these terms he said without it, life would not exist? Ah, Why are you people?
Greenhouse gas.
Ah. No, I think Zita got it. Zita said greenhouse effect. Mr. Speaker, am I correct? Is she correct?
Yeah, she said greenhouse effect, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So without, yes. So our first winner for today is Zita. Without greenhouse effects, life would not exist. Thank you very much, Zita, for paying attention and for answering. It's not greenhouse. You said greenhouse effects. Modesta. You said greenhouse effect. Yeah. So the next question, I'm just going to walk around this. He mentioned something else. He said that climate change is actually a normal process. He said it's a normal process and it's been happening right from the creation of the world, right? It's a normal process. However, um, that enhanced greenhouse effect is what causes climate change. He said enhanced greenhouse effects. You know, we already mentioned that without greenhouse effect, life will not exist. But he said enhanced greenhouse effect is what causes climate change. So can somebody explain how enhanced greenhouse effect is good, but how does enhanced greenhouse effect cause climate change? How does it now become a problem? Can somebody give us just a brief? You don't have to say it like you said, like an expert. Just explain what you understood by enhanced greenhouse effect causes climate change. Anybody? Did anybody catch it when he was explaining?
Can I talk?
Yes, sure.
So I think he said something about like the enhanced greenhouse effect is caused by when our atmosphere traps like too much of the is it the gases that I mean the sun's energy, something like that. That's what he was trying to say. That's what he said. So I don't know exactly how to explain it. I didn't write it down because the slide went by fast. But I think he said the atmosphere catches way more gases that they are supposed to catch on a normal.
Good. Mr. Speaker, is he correct?
To an extent, he is. But I said what I said. Let me just repeat again so that people can get it. I said that climate change is a natural process, actually. Climate change has been existing since the formation of the earth. But the climate change that we are facing now is caused by human activities. Greenhouse effect is a good thing. Because of greenhouse effect, life exists on Earth. Without greenhouse effect, the temperature of the Earth within the Earth's surface would be minus 18 degrees Celsius, which makes life impossible. But the greenhouse effect, how does it function? There are greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We mentioned that those greenhouse gases, I mentioned the four major greenhouse gases. You have water vapor, you have carbon dioxide, you have methane, you have nitrous oxide. Now, what happens is that these greenhouse gases help to trap the heat that is needed to keep the temperature in the earth like to livable, right? But the problem that we face now is enhanced greenhouse effect. It means that human beings are emitting more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Normally, there are gases in the atmosphere, those greenhouse gases, those methane, those carbon dioxide, those water vapor, those nitrous oxide, those chlorofluorocarbons. But because human activity is increasing the concentration of those gases in the atmosphere, more heat is trapped within the Earth's surface and the Earth is getting warmer. That's the problem. I hope it's clear now. Does it make sense now?
Does it make sense now?
Yes, it does. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely makes sense. Definitely makes sense. Thank you very
The
much.
Kennedy was Chigozie. I think it was Chigozie that answered.
Yeah, so she goes with the answer. He
I think
actually
he was
tried.
on track.
Yeah, he was right because he said that the gases they increase. He didn't know how to say it the way you said it. Yeah, so but the gases become more concentrated in the atmosphere and then they're able to trap more heat. That is why everywhere is a lot hotter than it should. But I don't know, maybe in the subsequent section, you now explain to us the cause of the rain. How does that now translate to so much rain and thunder and flooding? Because the heat now makes sense, but the rain is still not very clear. The flooding that we are or is the flooding, maybe the flooding is a function of, I don't know, like cutting down trees and poor irrigation and other things. But that's conversation for another day. Anyway. Yeah, so I think we are done with the questions. So we have Zita and we have Gozie. Harrison, do you have any question for them? Any question for us?
Do I have any question? Let me see. No. No, I don't have any question. I don't have question. I think I need to go for the German language class.
Okay.
Yeah.
She's already here.
Okay. Yeah, I'm coming.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Harrison. It was really a pleasure to have you join us. And thank you very much, everyone. So we have our winners for today. We have Zita and we have Gozie. And the first person to join was Modesta. She started screaming from even the WhatsApp group. So please, I think we should not take that prize from her. So thank you very much, everyone, for being present. It was truly a pleasure. Thank you very much. My husband is here, Mr. Kennedy. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, thank you very much, everyone else. Thank you, Gideon, for staying to the end. Thank you, Zita. Thank you, Gozie. I think this is Dima. Thank you, Dima. Thank you, Modesta. Thank you, everyone, for staying to the end. It was really a pleasure. So we'll see you tomorrow at the Hangouts. We'll hang out tomorrow for those who are in Abakaliki. And we also have the practicals for the urban farming. Yes. Please remember to send us the recording.
Okay, I'll stop recording now and it'll be available in a couple of hours. I'll send. All right.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you.
Okay. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.